video I'm going to be looking at the mau5Tank, which is this, not to be confused with the Maus, which is the tier 10 German super heavy tank. This is the main reward tank, main event tank, the main tank for December, because it's part of the collaboration with deadmau5, which, as you can see in the garage, is the main theme of December. And this is a tier 9 hybrid nation medium tank, and it is very unique for multiple reasons, which I'll get into later, but one of them being it has 2 guns. This is the first tank to have 2 guns in many years, and it's the first tank intentionally released with 2 guns since the Tankenstein, I believe. All the other tanks just had secondary guns added to them for balance reasons. But yeah, basically how you get this tank will be through the event pass. It's like the Annihilator event or the HoloLive event, which happened recently. If you're free to play, you can only get up to a certain stage and you can't go further. You can buy a pass for $9.99, which will let you get this tank if you do the missions, and then you can buy a pass for $25 or $20, and it will let you get the tank basically immediately. But that's how you get the tank. The event's going to start, well, at the next ×2 reset on December the 13th for your respective server. EU and NA will start after Asia. Just a note, this video may be a bit long because this tank has 2 guns, 2 separate sets of stats, and 2 very different ways you play the tank depending which gun you're using. So you may have to skip to the relevant section of the video for the gun you want to see, as I will be covering both in this video. But let's get straight into the stats. There will be a review on my website if you do want to have a look at that without this commentary. So, armor. This tank immediately has an auto ricochet upper plate, which is 80mm base thickness, which means nothing can overmatch it. It also has this driver's hatch, which is weak because it's not angled at all, and anything can go through that. The turret front, you can see, is very strong, but notice the gun mantlet. These areas around the gun mantlet are just flat armor with no angling or spaced armor whatsoever. You can see, turning the hull, the sides do look red, but typical of a medium tank, if you shoot the tracks, shots will penetrate. And you can also see the cheeks, when the turret is turned, do become weak. One more thing to note are these sort of speakers on the side of the turret, which I've called ears just because it's easier, on each side of the tank, and those are very penetrable since they're only 120mm thick. But you can see when the hull is turned, not much changes, but the turret side does become weaker. Switching to premium ammo, and by the way, that view with standard ammo was 245 AP, which is actually quite high penetration for a tier 9 medium tank. And 300 heat is also very high penetration for a tier 9 medium tank. In fact, most don't have 300 heat. Most have 270 to 290. So you can see, switching to heat, of course, the upper plate becomes penetrable because it was an auto ricochet, meaning it's not actually all that thick. So heat will go right through it, but APCR and AP will always bounce. Next to the turret, you can see these 2 triangle bits right next to the gun are the weakest, but other than that, it's still fairly strong. And one thing worth noting, I am using enhanced armor on this tank. And of course, when a turret is turned, just like with the AP view, it does become much weaker. Other than that, not too much else is different. The hull is penetrable, the turret is penetrable, if they load gold, with 300 heat. So next, side armor, 74. Not bad, it means you won't get HE'd from the majority of guns, though Hesh will be able to go through, obviously, and big guns with 90mm of HE penetration. And then you can see, when using full gun depression, which is actually 7 degrees, not 8, that's written wrong, it should say 7, the turret is actually pretty strong. So against standard ammo, of course, there's no weak points at all. other than these ears on the side of the turret. And then when using heat ammo, you can see you can penetrate right under the gun, and right next to the gun in these two triangular areas. However, because it's slightly red, your chances of bouncing are still there. It doesn't mean that you will absolutely penetrate these areas. It is just slightly weaker against heat. And one thing I want to note about this tank, when you look at it on Blitzkit, it looks not good on the hull, and that is because in Blitzkit, you view the tank as almost in a face hug, and of course tanks with auto ricochet upper plates are abysmal in a face hug because they rely so much on angling. So I've given this tank 2.2 degrees of gun depression in this view, and that's sort of more representative and accurate for how the upper plate actually performs in battle. And you can see the upper plate being over 240mm thick will actually resist all HESH, even from a 183 with calibrated shells. And you can see on the top of the turret there are these very tiny cupolas here. However, the majority of that model is actually not a hitbox. So yeah, that's the armor of the mau5Tank. It's pretty good for a medium tank, all things considered. Most mediums don't get this much armor, so it is pretty nice to have. However, it does kind of pay for it with mobility, which you'll see in a minute. And actually, because this tank has two guns, I'll quickly cover the mobility, because that's the same no matter which gun you use. 50 forward speed, very normal, very average, nothing special at all, especially for tier 9. 21 in reverse is actually pretty nice. 1 kilometer faster than usual, not that you'll really notice it too much. 58 degrees of traverse on hard terrain is not bad, but it's not great, and 44.5 on medium is pretty bad. Most tanks in tier 9, most medium tanks have much more than this on medium terrain. So, acceleration rate in-game, it's shown as 18.5 with 827 horsepower for 45 tons, and 45 tons means you can ram some tanks. Actual acceleration is 18.5, that is of course due to its 1 hard terrain resistance, and then 14.2 on medium terrain, which makes it the slowest tier 9 medium tank in terms of acceleration. Even slower than the E50, and that is because of its fairly low base power to weight ratio of 18.5. Most tier 9 mediums have more than that, or they have better terrain resistance, and then it's combined with this poor, well, relatively poor 1.3 medium terrain resistance. So try and stay on hard terrain to keep the best level of mobility, and this is what it pays for to get that armor. So moving to the gun, it has two guns, both are 110mm guns. You wouldn't be able to tell because of how thin it is in game, but it is a 110mm gun, both of them are. So one of them is a single shot gun. It's basically the same as any other tank's gun, like a Leopard or a Scharfrichter 4 or a Centurion Mark 7. It does 374 damage on AP, 310 on heat, and 472 on HE. All of these are pretty normal numbers. Well, not really. They're pretty random, but for having 374, the heat damage and the HE damage are both fairly normal if you scale them to other alpha damages. So, reload time is 8.4, giving it 2,664 DPM. That isn't terrible DPM, but it's nothing amazing. Most tanks in tier 9, most medium tanks in tier 9 do out DPM you and out reload you, but of course you do have great alpha damage of 374. Penetration 229 on AP, that is quite good. Heat 291, again it's good, and HE 60, again also good. Aim time is very quick, 2.7/2.8. The base aim time also very quick, 1.7. The dispersion very good, 0.322. And gun handling also very good, 0.14, 0.12, and 0.11. Gun depression is 7 degrees. Again, I've wrote 8 here. That is not correct. It is 7 degrees. So overall, this gun is amazing. There is no stat on this gun, which is bad. DPM, while not amazing, isn't bad for sure for having 374 damage. Its penetration is good, its aim time is amazing, its dispersion is good, and its gun handling is great. Nothing wrong with this gun, it is a very good gun. It also, worth mentioning, it has good shell velocity, better shell velocity than the tri-shot autoloader gun. So the other gun is this tri-shot gun, burst fire autoloader, just like the Annihilator. So it does 3 shots of 160 damage, or 125 on heat and 210 on HE, with 3 shells in the quote-unquote magazine, and a 0.23 second intraclip, so in less than half a second it will burst out 480 damage, which is a faster burst than the Annihilator has, which is worth noting because the Annihilator's burst combined with its lesser accuracy means that it often misses 2 out of its 3 shells, and a bit more than this tank does. So an 11.2 second reload is actually not bad for 480 alpha, a burst, and its DPM is 2462, which again, it's very low for a medium tank, but for having a burst of 480 isn't terrible. Penetration 233, that's good. 291 and 60 are the same as the other gun, which are both good. Aim time is 3/3.2, very good for having a burst of 480. Base aim time is 1.9, again, it's very good. Dispersion is slightly worse than the other gun, just like the aim time is, but 0.34 is still not bad for 480 damage. Not bad at all. In fact, you don't notice it much in the gameplay at all. And of course the gun handling, it's slightly worse than the other gun, but it is still not bad at all considering your damage burst is 480. Gun depression is 7 degrees, I've written it correctly here. And one important thing is this after-shot dispersion, which is just like a Helsing. It basically means the amount your gun blooms after each shot is very low, because the usual number for after-shot dispersion is 4. Here it is 1.8, which is very good. So this gun is not bad either. It's not nearly as good, as effective as the other gun, but it is very nice for damage trading. And for its stats, it doesn't have, well, for its damage, it doesn't have bad stats. It's just not as good as the other gun. It's nothing too amazing. So, which gun should you use? There is a very clear right/wrong choice. If you want to use the single shotgun with 374 alpha, this one will be for getting good stats, for being effective in battle, for winning battles, and for doing well overall. Just because it's more effective at being a gun. But the 3-shot burst autoloader is very fun, and it is good for damage trading, and it can be great in a platoon just because it does big damage. And you combine that with tungsten shells, which you'll see later, and it becomes a very strong combination to have in a platoon, but also just very fun to play solo. Other than that, this tank has quite a few things to be mentioned. One is the tracer shells mechanic, which allows you to spot tanks that you hit for double the time that they are usually spotted, which is always nice to have. One other thing is that this gun, well, this tank has all the consumables. So I'll get into how you equip it in a minute. Let's first go through the equipment because that's easier. Calibrated shells is needed for both guns, I would say. For the single shotgun, it's not needed, but it doesn't need vents either. And because this tank's accuracy, dispersion, aim time, gun handling, and DPM on the single shot are fairly... The DPM is decent, but everything else is amazing. You don't need vents at all, and having the penetration is just so nice to have. It makes for a great combination with the other stats. But for the tri-shotgun, the burst autoloader, calibrated shells is mandatory just because your heat damage is very low, and you want to try and minimize the amount that you have to lower your damage. So using heat is lowering your damage, and bouncing a shot is lowering your damage. So you want to have the best possible pen on AP, and then to not bounce heat, you want to have the best possible pen on that as well. Next, optics, because this tank's view range is actually really bad, 285.1. Definitely don't use camo rating, camo net, I mean. Engine accelerator, because this tank is a slow medium for tier 9. It doesn't have bad mobility overall, but as a tier 9 medium, it is the slowest one. Maybe along with the Glacier, I'm not 100% sure, I haven't checked that. And then enhanced armor, I'm using this because it has a pretty good turret, and enhanced armor sort of takes this tank over the level of penetration of tier 9 mediums. So without enhanced armor, you'll get penetrated in the turret front by around 285 to 300 millimeters of premium penetration. But with enhanced armor on, you won't get penetrated by that level of penetration, not nearly as much, especially when you're using gun depression. That is the most noticeable. So use that. The amount of hit points that enhanced armor adds, improved assembly adds, isn't worth bouncing an extra shot. Next, gun length drive, because both guns have okay shell velocity. The tri-shotgun has 900 meters per second, which, while not amazing, is definitely not bad. And then the single shotgun has 1000 meters per second, which is good. So enhanced gun lane drive kind of maximizes on the tank's amazing aim time on both of its guns, and you can really notice the difference when you switch to supercharger. Next, vertical stabilizer or refined gun. Both work on both guns. I have tried both with both guns in multiple battles, and I really didn't notice a difference for either of these. They both feel exactly the same, because on one hand you're aiming much faster because the tank has amazing aim time on both guns, and good gun handling, but on the other hand you're becoming much more accurate, which sort of counterbalances the aim time you're gaining because this gun already aims so quickly. So either of these work, you won't feel much of a difference. Toolbox, of course, because enhanced tracks is useless, and consumable delivery system or high-end consumables, that will be down to your personal choice and the consumable setup you're using. I would say the only one that is mandatory to use high-end consumables for is if you are using reactive armor. If you're not using reactive armor on your setup, then either of these will be a good choice. Next, provisions. This tank has the normal provision set, so just set it up normally. And then consumables. So how you want to equip this tank with consumables will depend on your playstyle and what you want to maximize on the tank. For me personally, I would say the best choice for the triple shotgun, the burst autoloader, is this, which is improved engine power boost with tungsten shells, or this improved engine power boost, reactive armor with tungsten shells, just because tungsten shells adds a lot of damage to your burst, taking it from 480 up to 552, which solidly places you as the highest damage medium. And it just really min-maxes on that trait of alpha damage, burst damage. Reactive armor helps you absorb damage, so that also helps you to trade much better, but the improved engine power boost, it will be to help your poor mobility as a tier 9 medium tank, because you do get outmaneuvered by every other medium that you will face, except maybe a 122 TM. But if you want to use the single shot gun, I would recommend this setup again, because speed boost with tungsten shells, your tank is slow for a medium, fairly slow, for tier 9 I should say, and tungsten again helping to boost your damage, in this case going from 374 up to 430, which is very nice. Another great one to use is reactive armor with tungsten, for the same reasons as the triple shot gun. This one maximizes on your alpha damage, taking it up to 430, and then reactive armor maximizes on your ability to soak damage and makes you better at trading. Then finally there's the option of adrenaline with tungsten. This just gives you crazy good damage output, because adrenaline will increase your DPM from 2,664 up to 3,117. And then on top of that, you add the DPM increase from having 430 alpha damage, and you've got very good damage output for a short period of time. So it depends what you want to choose. One I would definitely never recommend to use is reticle calibration, because this tank is so accurate on both of its guns. It doesn't matter if you use reticle calibration and the tri-shot and then try and get long range shots, because this won't affect your aftershot dispersion, so there is no point to use it for even such a niche scenario, and it's not needed in any other situation because of how accurate this gun is. Other ones to never use are engine power boost and reduced engine power boost, because you have the big engine power boost. If you don't have credits, I wouldn't recommend playing this tank because it relies heavily on the consumables. And it also relies on the cooldown booster, which you have to use if you want to have the best possible performance in this tank, just because of how much you use consumables in battle and how much they are a part of this tank's gameplay. But with all the stats and everything out of the way, finally I can show some gameplay of this tank. So, to show, 1 will be with the regular gun and 2 with the burst fire autoloader. Reason being, the regular gun is a fairly boring, uninteresting gun compared to the tri-shot gun, which is very interesting and unique. So because of that, because of how the single shotgun is, its gameplay is fairly generic for a medium. It's nothing too crazy, nothing too special, and it's not the most interesting to play, I'd say. In fact, it's fairly boring, just because your tank isn't super mobile. Its armor, while it's good, enemies can just shoot the lower plate or load gold and go through the upper plate. And of course the sides are nothing amazing, so this tank with the single shotgun really doesn't feel super fun to play, I'll say. It's a very good tank with the single shotgun, that is for certain. I'd rate it maybe an overall 8.5 out of 10. That is my initial opinion. Of course, the tank's, I've only had a few days to play the tank and try it out, so yeah, initial opinion. But it is a very good gun, very effective one for tier 9, because there's nothing wrong with it. So with this gun, I'd say how you play it is just like a regular medium. You use the mobility, get into position, and try to use the good 7 degrees of gun depression that you have to get hull down and use ridge lines against the enemies. The reason being because unlike a T-54, you actually have fairly good gun depression of 7 degrees, and you can actually trade because you have a very nice 374 alpha damage, which is more than every medium you will face in tier 9 other than the Cobra and the WZ-120. And on that note, you want to trade alpha damage with your enemies, not DPM. So trade shot for shot, and don't let them just full rush you and use their reload advantage against you. But basically, just try and out-trade them, and you'll do well. And there you can see the very nice auto-ricochet upper plate trolling that VK90, who it's his first time facing this tank. And then I get another lucky bounce, which I definitely should have. Didn't realise that guy had adrenaline on, because I thought I could confidently out-reload him. Turns out he had adrenaline on, and I couldn't. But here you can see the sort of nice alpha that this tank has. I did quite a high roll against that Foch for 20 damage. That is very nice. Another thing to know about this gun's gameplay is that you have to decide how you're going to use consumables. Are you going to use them separately or together? If you use them together, you can have very high rate of fire with very high alpha. 430 alpha with around 6-something second reload, which is very good. However, if you space them apart and don't use them together, you can sort of have a smaller advantage for a longer period of time.
Enemy armor is hit.
So there you could see I loaded the premium ammo and used tungsten, expecting to shut down the VK. Unfortunately, I didn't. And now there is a griller in front of me, and that griller is a very good player, so being a bit careful. Unfortunately, I am in a 1v3, so a bit hard to deal with this situation, but I kind of just have to try and make the most of it. So HE on this tank is worth using, just because it increases the damage by 100, and you can do more module damage with this gun, which is always nice. So that game, almost 3,700 damage. I did bounce 2 lucky shots from that VK. Well, 1 lucky shot, 1 expected one from the upper plate, which of course is nice in a medium tank. So the game crashed, but we're back. I did almost 3,700 in that game. 1 bounce off the upper plate, which was nice, and then 1 random bounce somehow on the hull side. But making 51,000 credits, which is actually quite low, and that will be down to how much this tank has to use consumables, which is definitely something to consider about it, because it relies a lot on consumables. But next is this battle on Castilla. This will be using the TRIPLESHOT gun, the autoloader, the burst fire gun, with 480 total burst damage. So in this game, I was testing the equipment setups, and I was actually using supercharger in this game, but because of how this gun plays, I found supercharger is just completely useless and absolutely not needed, because you're not hitting long range shots ever in this tank, or at least not consistently with this gun, because of it being a triple shot. And then when you're in close range, your aim time is so good already, and your dispersion of 900 meters per second is enough. So I decided to not use supercharger after this battle. But you can sort of see it's a bit slow up hills compared to any other tier 9 medium tank, but it's still not unplayably bad mobility. It's perfectly fine in my opinion. Just for a tier 9 it's not all that great. But gameplay for the triple shotgun, it's more of a support tank, because you don't have as good DPM or gun reliability in this gun. That will be of course down to its longer reload, and just like an Annihilator or a Helsing or a Soul Eater, there's a chance that you bounce 1 or 2 of the shots that it has in this very quick fire magazine. So you do have to be a bit more careful and cautious in your gameplay and not just go guns blazing, because your DPM is low. It's bad for a medium tank, but relative to its output it's not bad. And there you can see something very nice about this tank. 560 damage burst into that Leopard, and he's running away. That's something no other medium tank can do, other than maybe a Chimera using Hesh. But that's really what makes this tank so unique, so fun to play, is this gun, the triple shot autoloader. Here you can see the FV. Not knowing what this gun is, this tank is, bounces right off the auto ricochet upper plate. But yeah, gameplay for this gun, be a bit more careful and cautious, because you don't have the sustained DPM to deal with enemies. You do have to be a bit careful with getting overwhelmed, because you can't deal with the situation quickly. All you can do is trade pretty big damage. And that is mainly what this gun is for. Look at this, FV with 480 hit points, and I shut them down with no issue. No other medium can do that, other than something which activates tungsten shells, which in that case I didn't have to. There you can see I hit 2 shots on the FV, and it is worth using HE even on tanks with Spall Liner, because it still does an additional 24 damage for a total magazine, which is still decent, as long as you penetrate all of them. And that's something about this gun. Use the shell type that will allow you to penetrate the most shells. Because if you miss one shell, no matter what type of ammo it is, it's going to do less than a different type of ammo. So if you use AP and you bounce one shot, it does less damage than heat penetrating 3 shots. If you use HE, you don't penetrate one shot, it does less damage than AP penetrating all 3 shots. So definitely do use the ammo that is most practical for the situation, because it does make a massive difference on this gun with its low DPM. But there you can see 1640 damage blocks from that FV. Who didn't know, this has an auto ricochet upper plate, and I managed to get 2900 damage, making 93,000 credits in that game. Again, it's not bad, however, the credit score is sort of hit pretty hard by the fact that you have to use consumables a lot. So this game on Mayan Ruins it does show this gun very well. And also notice the mobility of the tank. In this game I don't have the engine power boost, I have the reactive armor consumable. So again, in this battle you're going to see me using something I recommend in the gameplay of this tank, which is a second line position. The reason you want to use a second line position is because you're not on the front line, you're not being the main focus of the enemy attention, which you don't want to be with a gun which there's a high chance that you bounce one of the shells, and its DPM is already low with a fairly long reload. Unfortunately, I don't make the best play in this battle. I go up, take 2 shots, and it was not worth it. So I fall back, and then I also notice there's a ton of enemies down here, so I'm thinking, I'm not going to be here, I'm going to take a different position in a minute, apparently. So here I think I've decided I'm going to reverse, because there's too many enemies and I only have 870 points. There you can see activating reactive. I only take 300 from the Jagdtiger when I would have usually taken 460. So reactive is another great choice on this tank, will allow you to trade very well. So with this gun, other than being a bit more careful with the gameplay, there are some things you have to notice. Also notice the position I'm in now. This is that second line position. The main focus of the enemies is not me, it's the tanks that are in front of me. Which is nice, because it means I can just put in the damage and not get shot back. But something to note on this gun in particular is that its heat ammo is very low in terms of damage. If you scale this tank's burst damage compared to other guns which do similar damage, the heat ammo does on average 35 to 45 less than other guns would with a similar sort of alpha. So with this tank's already low DPM, you want to avoid using heat as much as possible, which is why I said use the shell that is most likely to penetrate all 3. Another thing, the module damage on this gun, it's terrible. 55. Compare that to a Gravedigger, it has 100. So very bad module damage. You can't track things, you can't crit things. So HE is really only worth it for increasing your damage just a little bit. And that's another thing. I wouldn't recommend using HE against tanks that have small HE-able areas. Like, I'm not using it against the Grilla because I do not want to risk bouncing one shot or missing one shot. I'd rather penetrate all 3 AP because the HE damage increase isn't high and it doesn't do too much module damage. But here you can see using this second line position very effectively. I basically wasn't the center of attention at all in that battle except at the very beginning, which allowed me to farm up the damage on these tanks, the Grilla, the Jagdtiger and the FV215, with the Object 268V4 taking most of the damage. Well done to him, because he really did soak up a lot of damage that battle. But yeah, that game, really think it's important to show that second line position use, because That's what's important for a gun like this. Fairly unreliable at long range, so you have to use a second line position where you're still relatively close to the enemies, but you have your allies to be your armor to take the attention of the enemies. But yeah, that game, 3,200 damage, pretty good for a gun with 2,400 DPM and relatively unreliable type of gun. But the mau5Tank, is this worth it? Definitely it is worth it. For $10, euros, pounds, whatever it is, it will be 10 apparently, that's all I know. It is worth it because this is an interesting and unique tank. I would say not for the single shotgun, but for the autoloader. It's just fun to play. It's very unique for having that type of gun, but also high alpha damage, and it's just fun to play. Being able to do 550 damage to enemies with tungsten, it's just something no other tank can really do at all in the game. On top of that, you don't have to use that gun. You can use the other gun if you want to be competitive, and overall it's a pretty good tank because it's just got armor, its mobility is usable, it's enough, and its gun. Both of its guns are good, with the single shotgun being arguably amazing. So for $9 you get a tier 9 tank, which is unique and might not ever come back because it is a collab tank as usual. There's intellectual property and licensing things that go on with that, which sort of makes it harder for them to come back to the game. So it is definitely worth considering getting this tank, especially if you want something a bit interesting and fun to play at tier 9. And I definitely do really enjoy this triple shot gun, even though it is not the best one. But yeah, that is the mau5Tank. I'm not sure if I might do another video on it because it does have two guns and they're pretty interesting, but I'll see. That is the review. Pretty good tank, interesting, unique. Go for it if you want, it's cheap. But yeah, thanks for watching.